Okay, kind of expanding on the visual lead-in theme, I really felt compelled, as I always do when I do stamp sketches, to kind of finish the scenes off. And I thought, okay, let's just finish these scenes off, and I'll do it in kind of a mass production style of, using one ink at a time, but just doing that one ink on here, 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 and here, and then moving through it all. I thought I would finish these faster, but I don't know. I just decided to use more and more inks to make things look a little bit more deep and rich and I don't know, varied in terms of the different hue and color schemes used in, the various areas within each scene. And I don't know, I just took it all the way and, I don't know, did all 6 scenes like this. I like the way they turned out, though. I don't know, there's other things that I still want to do on these. I want to kind of finish these off with some other details, like the gel pens or the pigmenting, so I don't know, there might be one more segment to this, but one of the biggest things is, in this video right here, I talk about what I always tend to talk about, and that's kind of the retention of some lighter areas within your scenes, to create this kind of oscillation between light and dark and light and dark and light and dark like that. And that's the same thing that's going on all of these. I use different color schemes, browns in the cabin, browns on the pathways, but what you'll find is if you watch this video, if you've seen my grass videos too, or anything where I do grass, I typically do all kinds of greens within those spaces, but then I also use the browns, from a cabin or the browns from a road or whatever into that grassy area just so it doesn't look so kind of like a day glow um, hot fluorescent green colors, but we get the retention, we get the benefit of the brightness of those types of greens, but it kind of mellows out when you use browns in those given spaces. So that's what I like to do as far as dye-based inks and whatnot. I would do the same thing if I was doing this in colored pencils or chalks. I would give a little bit of continuity between the different areas. So also in this video I've used blues in here for this kind of moonlight scene, but I've used all the blues from the skies, believe it or not, in that grassy area. So you get in the grass we have the greens, but we also have the browns of the road and cabins, but we also have the blues of the sky. And I feel that doing those similar colors over everything like that creates this nice continuity between the different areas because they're not so separated in terms of the hue that is used on all of them. So greens are created by blues and yellows, so greens are certainly related to blues, so that's how you can use the blues as a foundation for your greens in here. I have a little bit of that pink tinge in these skies right here, and I bring that same pink tinge down into my pathway a little bit. That area of my cabin got a little bit too pink bright, but bringing some of those different colors into these other areas in here, even if it's just a tiny little touch of it, can create a little bit of kind of a lighting continuity, you might say. So anyways, if you choose to watch the video, I hope you enjoy it. Certainly a lot of kind of mass production style, so I don't know how it'll be in terms of viewing it. If you choose to watch it through, you'll see how one color is utilized in all of these different compositions, kind of one composition at a time, and I'll move through all the various things. I don't know, skip to the end and see, how these things all kind of come together, using my darker tones too. So anyways, thanks for tuning into the channel. Hope you enjoyed the video on whatever, paths and road stamp sketch coloring and lighting. Okay, for those of you who have watched a few of my videos and have seen stamp sketches made on a video, like I have just done here in my previous video talking about visual lead-ins in the form of roads and paths. From past videos, anytime I do this type of thing, I really feel compelled to finish them off in color and to see where they can kind of get to. in terms of a finished piece. Some people only stamp in black and white. They do compositions, and sometimes they just leave it at that. So you can do something like that, but I tend to like addressing my scenes and compositions with tone and color and values and different intensities, just to kind of create the overall mood of a scene. These certainly do take on a certain mood, but it's really when you apply different colors and different tones. Could be a monochromatic piece too, but those types of things really set the mood because it really reinforces the lighting within a scene, and I think that's largely where mood comes from in a given composition. All right, now I don't want to spend too much time on any one of these, so I thought I would do a video that just goes into something that I'll just call speed coloring, okay? Now, it's not to be mistaken with hurried coloring, okay? I'll take my time on each one of these, but I'll just kind of do it in a mass production method here, doing similar tones on all 6 compositions here. All right. Now let me just see how fast I can get through some of these, and we'll just start from there. I think these ones right here, the ones that don't have some kind of sky figure in it, I think I'm just going to make it a daytime type of scene. And this one right here with this moon, I'll make that a nighttime scene. Now that moon, if it was done, I don't know if I would do it in black ink like that for a daytime type of scene. It would have a kind of a different feel to it. I mean, you could make that a sun. In other words, I could do yellow tones or whatever and make it, you know, something like a dusk-ish type of, you know, tone, or it could be kind of this hazy, you know, kind of foggy, cloudy look in front of that moon, sun, or something like that. But I'm just going to make it a moon nighttime type of scene. Okay. So, anyways, I'm working on glossy cardstock right here. Okay. And I'll be working in dye-based inks in the form of some Memento, Distress, and Marvy colors. They're all dye-based inks. And I'll largely be working in a palette of blues, greens, and browns here, okay? All right. So, typically earth tones. I won't be doing any, like, sunsets or something like that here, just for, you know, the sake of speed and in terms of getting through all of these compositions. But I wanted to do this video just to show you how fast certain, you know, scenes can be resolved in terms of the coloring aspect of them. Okay, I'll be using my color box stylus tool right here, and I'm just, because I have so many scenes to do, I really find that there's a benefit to using a re-inker, you know, because just the sheer amount of ink that can be applied to the scene at any given time. I'm working in a very light color, an ocean aqua. If I was working in like Marvy's or something like a Memento, or you can be working in Distress, use a very light tone if you're going to do this. And my lightest tones, I really recommend having kind of your primary colors in very light shades, such as like a really light pale pink, a light blue, and a yellow, because all those 3 colors can form a foundation for just about any hue by just the mere fact that you can layer these colors over one another. So, say like a blue and yellow will mix to form green. Blue and pink will get your violet tones. And, where am I? Yeah, did I say blue and yellow form green? And blue and, oh yeah. The pink and yellow will form your orange, golden, you know, colors. Okay, now I'm just going into my scene right here. Speaking of that, I'm just using my blue as kind of a foundation for the green to come, so I mean, I can certainly make this into kind of a cooler or nighttime type of scene just using blue tones, okay? Kind of cool nighttime type of scene, but this is going to be more as as far as using it down here in the grass, that's going to be used as a foundation for my greens, okay? And that's a good way to approach something like that. Because if you only have blue tones up here and you only use green tones within the grass or something like that, sometimes it doesn't look as kind of related. You don't have as much continuity between the two different areas when you don't have some overlap in terms of the colors used in all of the, in the given spaces. It doesn't mean you have to have blue everywhere, but I did put some blue on this pathway here, okay? Now I'm just going to do these one at a time, okay, using this color so I don't have to keep switching. I'll do all of my areas that could use this Adirondack Lights Blue, or whatever color you happen to be using. Light blue. I think there's a tumbled glass distress ink. I haven't used it yet, but I have a feeling that would be a really good one. In addition, that Summer Sky is an excellent one too. It's very light and very slippery in terms of the consistency of it. Okay, now as I'm doing this, I'm not just coloring areas, I'm kind of defining light. So, it's important to leave some areas a little bit lighter than others, okay? So that becomes my moon, or my source of light. The moon is the source of light, and a lighter area down here becomes the reflected light. So we create some sort of visual dialogue, okay, between light source and reflected light, okay? And that's the same thing going on with, some of these houses, some of them I put a little tone onto, some of them I just leave as is. There's not any specific area that's, you have to designate. You don't have to know anything really about lighting, because this doesn't have to be, realism here. We don't have to be there, okay? It could be like stage lighting, where you are a stage director, lighting director on a stage production, and you're just keeping illuminated anything that you want to be kind of the focal point of the scene. My preference is to leave things that are coming at you, like a source of water, a river, a lake or something like that that's reflective of the light in the sky, roads like this. I like to leave those a little bit lighter so that we have kind of an entry point for the viewer to enter the scene, okay? And that goes perfectly with these compositions right here, because they were all about kind of your visual lead-ins into scenes. These compositions were about roads and paths, okay, in scenes. Okay. Right here, I'm going to leave some areas of my mountain a little bit lighter than other areas on that mountain, okay? But there's no right or wrong as far as that goes. It's just kind of about an oscillation of lighting that I think gives your scenes kind of a more dynamic surface due to the variation that happens on the surface. It could be a variation of color, value, light and dark, intensity, bright and dull, alright? So just vary it a little bit, okay? So here's my lighter area on my path down here. I've left some areas a little bit lighter on my grass, right behind that lady on the horse, this little mound right here, a couple areas up on the mountain. So see, it's just kind of varied. It's not all addressed exactly the same way. Okay. And see, by doing this, we're already kind of establishing a little bit of a mood to the scene, It'll be much more apparent, the more colors we lay down. Okay, here's a similar type of thing. We have that visual lead-in road here. Alright, now this one has that cabin in there, and I'll make that cabin brown. Don't always have to, I don't know if the cabin would be brown on like a winter moonlit night where you really can't see very much hue, okay, in that form of lighting. My fingers are getting really coated with ink here. Okay, something like that. A little bit more open sky up here. Maybe I'll do a few streaks up there and retain some of the well, maybe a little bit more of the white than I did in some of these other compositions. Just because what you leave as kind of white like that becomes your vapor in the sky, your cloud or whatnot. Okay. Okay, that's good on that. See the variation? I left a little bit light here, a little bit back here. We'll get a little bit more color down here. We have that tree back there, so I'll put a little bit of a shadow underneath these trees, make it a little bit darker underneath those trees, like so. Okay. Maybe that horse is casting a little bit of a shadow underneath there, so. Alright, there's nothing more to it than that. Okay. Vary it, okay? That's the big thing. And we're not subject to specifics or logic, you know, in terms of lighting, at least. Okay. And you can do these scenes in any type of color scheme you want. If you like purple, then do it in purple. Okay, but I would vary it. I would have little areas that are lighter purple than others. Maybe some areas would be pink, something like that. Maybe leave a little bit of room for some yellow in it or something like that. If your favorite color is kind of like a turquoise blue, then why not do a turquoise blue twilight scene or something like that, you know? Not in terms of the movie Twilight, but, you know, in terms of the time of day, you know, when you can get all these kind of different colors like that. Okay. See that right there? There's a little bit of streak of that white back there. Maybe I'll kind of divide it up a little bit. Just streak across it like so. Okay. So I've established my foundation color, okay? It's kind of like an undertone, unless that's what I keep it at, but yes, I intend to use more colors on it. Okay, let's start moving up into the sky, okay? Maybe I'll bring some of this color into the you know, the grassy areas, I'm not sure. Alright, which one of these did I start off with? I think I started off with this one. I'll let this one kind of set up a little bit. Set up meaning dry a little bit. I'll use my same applicator here. Let's move on to a different brand here. Let's move into the Memento. The Memento is kind of the Bahama blues, you know, kind of a medium tone blue. Okay, and where do you add this? You add it kind of roughly in the same areas that you did with your first color, your previous color, okay, whatever that one happened to be. But maybe you'd use a little bit less of this color, okay? When you start moving up into your medium tones, maybe don't color everything, okay? Now, on one of my videos, I talked about just reiterating where there is darker areas on the designs. You know, in terms of shading, you can use those as cues for where you can apply additional tone, and that will kind of give the illusion of depth within that design itself, okay? So you can see that right along the pathway. Those areas that are a little bit darker, okay? And that's where I've added some tone, extra tone, with the stippling process of coloring, or not coloring, but shading line artwork, okay? So there we have it right there, okay? See, but I didn't go up into here. I went up into here, this area, with my lighter blue, but with the darker blue, this medium blue, I'm kind of hitting the shadow areas, okay? Now this is just a, one way to do this. There's all kinds of ways you can approach the finishing of your scenes, okay? But if I'm to do this 6 different scenes in, kind of quick order, I'm going to do things very, kind of systematically and in a way that's both effective but fast, okay? Kind of adding in some shadows underneath those trees. Going into my grass, again with the blue. I'm not going to make blue grass, but the grass should look like it has some mass to it, okay? And it casts shadows, okay? Due to the lighting within the scene. Alright, there we have that. You can see where I've reiterated the shadow down here with some additional tone. Alright, maybe the cabin is casting a shadow, so I can put some tone there. I'm not worried about that fence. That fence will be whatever color the surrounding area is going to be. Okay, the area behind the cabin. Let's get a little bit of this tone back there. Okay. Did I already do this one? Okay, let me see here. Which ones did I? Okay, I already forgot which ones I did. Here we go. Grabbing from the wrong pile. Alright. Having that kind of strong saturation with that first tone is really making it easy for me to layer and apply these darker tones, although this Memento is a very slippery ink in itself. Okay, but it's kind of those first colors, to me are some of those important ones because they kind of set that foundation and they allow for an ease of application of those darker tones. Okay? Because what happens is the paper gets a little bit wet with that ink. Okay? And having kind of a, it's not damp or anything, but the pulp of the paper becomes a little bit moist. And kind of blending wet into moist is a little bit easier than blending wet into completely dry, okay? Okay, this one's an easy one right here. This one's going to be predominantly cool. cool blue. Maybe that moon's a little bit too stark white. I'll put a little bit of tone over the top of it. Okay, so it's not so stark white, okay? And I can get a little bit of variation up here too. I'll leave a few streaks of lighter tone blue just by not toning everything out exactly the same. Alright, so there you have it. And one more. If I'm doing like a specific card or something like that for an exchange that requires a lot of originals, this was probably how I would approach it. If I'm doing it in this style, usually I wouldn't do something in this style that has so much, individual coloring like this. For scenes, I would do something like a Braillard approach or something like that. Photo stamping or something like that, where you're just kind of stamping the composition over an existing kind of background, or a background that already kind of started off with something, then white piece of paper. But if I was to do this is the way I would do it. I would do it kind of like an assembly line style, which isn't too bad, because with each color, being that you're doing the same thing so much in repetition, one right after another, you really get the feel for using that existing color over the top of your composition. So it should come out nice and smooth and easy to do. That way you won't overdo a certain color because you'll be completely in tune with it, probably. Alright, let's go with, I'll just do this in reverse order here. I was just stacking those up. I'll just kind of take them from the top again. But here is my darker blue now, okay? And see, I'll use this, but I'll use it a little bit more sparingly. I'm kind of coming into the corners, I guess. Alright, so something like that. Maybe I want a little bit of a variation here. Let me put a little streak across that. That was looking a little boring to me there. Okay, I'll get a little texture in my sky, okay? You can use dark blue down here in an area that will eventually be dark green. Okay. Alright, so you can see kind of my lighting scheme in here a lot easier now. The more tone that I apply and start to achieve that kind of a wider value range, okay? The wider the value range, the more apparent the lighting scheme. Not that every, lighting scheme has to involve something going to very dark. You can do much more of a pastel feel or something like that, and it takes on its own kind of characteristics and look to it, It has a different emotional quality to it. Alright, so you can see I've kind of hit this area down here to create a little bit more shadows at the base of these. Maybe this would be illuminated down here, but I wanted to create some sort of separation between here and oscillate things a little bit more. We have kind of a dark, light, like that, okay? So I'm not kind of overly overanalyzing things in terms of, well, let me see, if the moon was there, then, you know, would it be really be dark right there? I don't know, you know what I mean? I don't do that. I just kind of vary my surface, and, you know, I don't really worry about, kind of, you know, really super realism, you know, realism in terms of kind of a lighting scheme within a scene. I want it to look, you know, I don't want, you know, I want it to look like it references something, you know, usually. But I'm not a slave to kind of my notion of reality when it comes to that at all, you know. These are our own little worlds that we're doing and that we are creating in a given space, so things just, you know, we're kind of developing our own sense of kind of the our notion of the ideal within a given space. All right. So that being said, like I said, it's like a stage production, you know, where you can have multiple lights and you can light up anything, or like a movie or something like that, you know. If you're setting up lights to kind of emphasize something, that's what you'll do. You can have, when people are taking photographs of someone somewhere, they're using reflectors and everything like that. Out on location to emphasize something, to front light someone a little bit better, to put a warm glow on them, whatever, you know. If they're taking pictures of houses or architectural types of shots, you know, it's going to look a little bit different, you know. If you have someone shoot it for like a professional portrait or something like that, than if you just kind of go out there and shoot it just as is. Okay. Alright, so there is the dark blue on that one. It's looking like nighttime scenes, right? Which you could do, you know, we could, I don't know, some of these could be nighttime scenes if you want it to be. I don't have to move into the warm green tones, but we'll see. Okay. Is this the one with a little bit more sky up here? Okay. This little, this is a 20-year-old, I think, stylus tool that has kind of developed that little rip there. These were used in all kinds of workshops and make and takes and whatnot. But they are still going pretty good. But I just trimmed that off, I really didn't need it. I always use my media to death and just until it cannot be used anymore. Some of my old pads, you know, they're 20 years old, they're kind of crumbling, and I'll use it until I can, or until I can't anymore. Alright, there we go on that one. See that little shading underneath the trees? Maybe this background one too. Let's put a little darker tone underneath that to create some shadows. Okay, and last one. Last one, which was the first one that I started off with. The feel of this one is a little bit different because this piece of paper is, you know, this cardstock has been allowed to dry a little bit longer, so I feel like grabbing a little bit more. So what I'll do is I'll just use a lighter touch And I'll apply with more repetition here. Because I don't want to get these types of marks, you know, on my scene at this point in time. Well, really at no point in time, but especially when I kind of, you know, I'm kind of moving along and getting towards the, you know, the completion of a given color scheme or area or whatnot. Okay, so now we have that. All right. Hue change. All right, I'm just kind of getting tired of doing the same color over and over and over again. All right, let's see. Let's try a bamboo leaves. Let's start addressing some of this grass area. All right. Going to this green. It's kind of a warm, kind of olive green hue. Where do we apply this one? Kind of roughly think about the same areas that you applied, maybe one of your medium tone blues, okay? We'll leave some of it as is in light, okay? If we retain some of the lighter areas within our given space, it will reflect kind of our lighting scheme a little bit more than if we fill everything in. Which you can do, but you'll just have to deepen the shadows a little bit more. So try to retain some of that, those lighter areas, especially when we move into our warmer tone, or darker tone greens, I should say. Okay, going over the blue there, suddenly it becomes kind of more of a turquoise, blue or green. Okay, something like that. It's still a very cool green right now because we have a lot more blue down applied in that area, but we'll hit it with some other types of greens as well. Kind of a bright yellow green, right? And that'll start changing the spirit of it a little bit. Okay. Let's hit this one a little bit more. Okay. Alright, this one right here. If I just do this one in blues, I can call it my Midnight Rider again. Midnight Rider in reference to previous video. Okay. All right, so we have that foundation kind of set. Right. Down here. You don't have to use every color to its full intensity either. You can kind of use a much drier version of it somewhere to create a lighter version of that existing color. Okay. This one, do I want any of this color? Maybe I'll get a little tinge of this green down here, just for a little bit of variation. You probably wouldn't see that in a scene, but in this scene in my world, maybe there is a little bit of color, you know, just to create a little bit of a variation and glow down there. In the night, okay, final scene right here with this first color of green. tree a little bit. Okay. All right. That was the bamboo leaves, by the way. Let's take a look at some brighter tones here. Okay. Well, I don't know if it's brighter. It's certainly lighter and more yellowy, okay. This color right here is probably lighter than that bamboo leaves, but let's just go with it anyways. I usually start lighter and work darker when it comes to my coloring process, but let's just go with this. Okay, I'll leave that one as is. Okay. This is going to look really weird in many ways. It looks kind of like a super bright, almost kind of fluorescent or day glow color green in here, okay? They always do, but I'll show you what I do to kind of knock down some of that intensity and that glow to make it a more kind of earthy looking grass texturing our surface. Okay. Now see, the more colors you add down, process goes a lot faster because you've really filled in and kind of the more colors you add in or become a little bit more of like a kind of like an embellishment color, I guess. Okay. It's the first colors of any given hue or scheme over given objects that takes the longest because those ones have the most amount of coverage. Okay, so they're kind of coming around. It's a little bit too blue in there for me, so let's kind of go over that with this green here. This one's called yellow green. So anything like that would work. This one right here is looking really boring, isn't it? So that's where this brighter, kind of warmer tone kind of comes into play. Gives it a little bit more excitement due to the intensity of this and also the temperature. Everything was looking very cool. And again, you can have a cool composition, but this one right here was kind of cool temperature-wise and a little bit dull. So we need a little bit more of a range of temperature, intensity. Okay, see that right there? It's kind of coming around a little bit. Kind of see it coming to life. Same with this one right here. Right. I don't know if we'll be able to see a lot of this, you know, kind of yellow-green later on. It might get covered up, but the glow that's created by this underneath other colors will create a nice saturation and richness because colors that you'll add on over the top of it are transparent, so this color will not be, you know, it's not going to be a lost cause. It will be affecting the overall visual and color scheme in the layers of ink that are being applied, okay? Because they're transparent again. They're see-through. So then how it really brought that area to life. Want this area a little bit brighter, then bring a little bit more into it, okay? A little bit more lively, I kind of like that. Let's go in here with a little more intensity as well, I think. Yes, okay. We're taking it kind of to a earlier time of day, I think, by introducing this warmth into the scene. It was kind of looking like, I don't know, kind of a dull looking, I don't know what time of day it would have been. Alright. I'm getting more gutsy with this one. Let's just go add it down like so. Really brighten it up. It's a nice foundation. Okay. Not the moonlight one. Not this one. Alright. I didn't use this color a lot. You know, it was just I've always had it, but I usually use my light green. Okay, this one's very bright as well. It's less yellowy, okay? It's more of like your, I don't know, fluorescent green color, okay? I always use that for my brighter element. Okay. I don't know if you can kind of see a difference. Yeah, it's pretty intense in terms of the brightness aspect of it, okay? Brightness is the relative intensity of something, not the lightness of it, which is the relative, you know, light and dark of something. Okay. Sometimes the brightest colors are in the shadow areas where they're not being kind of washed out due to the, you know, the intensity of the, you know, the sunlight being shining on it. Okay, see how nice that is? We're starting to build it up, though, and we don't really, you know, at this point in time, I don't really know if you can tell that there's been blue laid down underneath it, but having that blue down there creates that relationship to the sky area, so it doesn't feel so kind of unconnected in terms of your overall kind of color scheme that you're developing here. Okay. Alright. That is that. It's looking pretty bright in there. Alright, let's see. This is a jungle green. It's a little bit more of a kind of a muted, earthy green. Maybe there's a little bit of brown in it or something like that. Kind of hitting my shadow areas again as opposed to the overall area. Alright. And when I get to it, you know, some of that brown kind of defining some of these roads and paths, dirt roads and paths, I'll bring some of that brown into this green, and that's my great kind of I don't know, mellowing agent as far as kind of controlling the intensity of the green tones, okay? The green tones are too, I don't know, they look okay here, but they're a little bit too intense, you know? It's too, it's a little bit too bright, okay? I want the brightness, but I want it kind of earthy in some areas. Maybe I'll retain some of the brightness in some of the areas. But it just kind of mellows everything out. Brown in green. Okay. Right. Right, see, kind of hitting my shadow areas again, reiterating it with these tones. Alright, let's see. Let's go with one more green while we're at it. And this is just called green. It's just your Marvy green, it's your basic one. Cottage ivy would work okay too. I mean, just, you know, use your kind of Christmas green, you know, just your kind of neutral green. It's not really cool or warm. Or you just, I don't know, use your dark, whatever dark green you have. Okay, but see this right here, I'm kind of hitting more of my shadow areas only, okay? And see how kind of that's giving, you know, really nice dimension to that grassy area. Maybe I want to put a little bit of, you know, shadows at the base of some of these trees with a little bit of darker green too. That gives those trees kind of some mass and opacity, saying that, you know, those objects are casting shadows, okay? and it kind of anchors them into a given space as well. Okay. Okay, cabin right here is casting a bit of a shadow. I have to be careful. My darkest colors, I don't use quite as much of them, and when I do, I'm using the colors over the top of a lot of other colors that have already been laid down. So, you know, my pads tend to be very juicy, my darker colors, because the lighter colors are the ones that give you the most amount of coverage. Now, I'm kind of hitting the shadow areas just in general, and I don't have a lot of this ink coming off of my applicator because it's, you know, the paper isn't quite as absorbent, because the paper is kind of achieving, you know, almost a kind of a saturated or super saturated pulp. So you don't get this ink being drawn out, meaning you don't use as much ink. So be careful when you get into your darker tones that you don't just, you know, go in there and leave a big streak like that. If you do that with the lightest of tones, it's going to be very light. But if you do that with your darker tone, you might have a big slathering of some color down. So kind of as you move darker and darker, kind of use a lighter touch at first, you know, get a feel for that pad. If there's a lot of ink in that pad, then, you know, maybe blot it out a little bit, or stay on the edge before you take it in there a little bit, you know, longer. Okay. So I'm going to create a little bit of variation, bringing a shadow in there like that. Let's go a little bit darker around this bend here. Okay. That creates a little bit more variation right there. And I'm just reiterating what's already on the design itself, okay? Shadows underneath the trees here. Shadows over here underneath these trees. I'm going to want to finish these off with like pigment inks and gel pens and whatnot. I won't do it in this video though. See, when I do the stamp sketches, I feel like coloring them, and after I color them, I really feel like finishing them off more with those little embellishments and kind of details. Oh, I don't know, maybe I'll do a video on that. Okay, so here we go. Darken the shadows a little bit. Shadows at the base of trees. Okay, something like that. Last one, last but not least. At the base of those trees. Trees casting their shadows down here. Come up into the trees a little bit, maybe. The cabin, at the base of the cabin, kind of setting the cabin into the setting a little bit. By putting a shadow at the base of it. Create a little bit of variation within this grass right here. Creating a little bit of light and dark oscillation. We have that cow right there. I'll kind of spotlight the cow just by not taking too much of the darker ink and applying it over the top of the cow. I'll put some of that darker ink around the cow, so that kind of illuminates that cow a little bit. Okay. so that is the green now. All right. Let's start looking at some brown tones. Here's some brown tones. This is a pale orange, brown, and dark brown from Marvy. We can try some of the distress inks as well. Tea dye, antique linen. Where is my Walnut Stain? Walnut Stain's a great one. All of those distress inks are fairly light in value. This Walnut Stain looks darker, but I can almost start off with that one if I want to. But let's start off with this tea dye first, okay? This tip right here is a little bit dry. Okay, I'm gonna have to clean off my tips again. Alright. When these tips start getting really dry, they don't apply ink quite as nice because they're not as absorbent. Alright, tea dye. Going into the scene and applying it to some of my road. Oscillate a little bit. Don't have everything. Don't see this road as just one area to color in uniformly. Vary it a little bit, and that will kind of define your lighting within that given space. Go ahead and put the tea dye into your grassy areas as well. And that will kind of give your grassy areas a little bit more of an earthy kind of tint, especially when you get through all of it. Maybe not with the tea dye right here, but a little bit though. It'll kind of mellow things out a little bit. This one's kind of giving me a little bit of an extra glow, I think. It's kind of creating a color glow by putting it into that grass. Okay, see that? How it's kind of starting to look. It takes on a little bit of a different characteristic when you bring in this orangish tinge to it over the, which is kind of what brown kind of is. It has a little bit of red. Something like that. Okay, this one. They all really need this, okay. Now, if I had a distress ink re-inker, I would be using that right now, but because I have to go for kind of a lot of coverage with this right now. Oh, this one has the cabin. Let's go ahead and put it over the cabin, and I'll vary this cabin more with some of the medium and darker tone browns. Okay, but I'll just put all of this really light brownish tint over just about everything. It's a pretty light value of a brownish color right now, so I can use it. I can use it pretty fully in terms of my coverage. Okay. It's almost like there used to be these pads called Adirondack lights, and some of these distress inks are so light in value, they kind of serve their they were by the same company, but they kind of serve the same purpose in terms of, starting off my areas with a given light value hue, okay? Alright, what color do I want to do on my background mountains? Should I put a little bit of earthy tone? Yeah, might as well, okay? Kind of creates a little bit of continuity between foreground, midground, and background objects, okay? We have a similar tone in terms of the blue, but that little warmth in there kind of is a nice touch. Okay, you see that little glow happening in here. Alright, let's put it over our road and say that this is a kind of a dirt road. Okay. Same thing here. Here's the cabin. Just darken the darker areas a little bit. Well, this one's a pretty light color, so I'll put some of that on the roof. Let's go over this, almost this whole thing. You can leave some of the white if you want to, but let's get that down in this road. The road really needed to be addressed. As I said in my previous video with this crooked path stamp right here, if you don't have people or something like that, or you know, something like this composition where it leads up to something like a cabin or, you know, a front door where it's obviously a, you know, a path, you can easily make this crooked path, you can have it be your stream running through your scene, okay? So interchangeable, you know, in terms of imagery, and, you know, you can have a moon can easily be if it's a sphere in the sky, not if with all its craters and all that type of stuff, but a moon can be a sun, just depending on what colors you stamp it in. In this case, a path can easily be a little brook or stream. Okay. This is what I do. Sometimes I really soak in some ink and I'll squeeze it out on my page. Okay, if it's a real thick ink, you can do that. If it's like a matte paper, you know, you'll get a big, you know, unmovable, you know, shape like that. But on glossy cardstock, it allows you to, you know, kind of move it around. If the ink is kind of a thicker ink, and distress inks, Mementos are. Marvy's really not so much. They're thinner inks, so they soak into the paper faster. But you can go like this and get a big slathering of that ink out and then just kind of drag it out like that, okay? And again, I'm doing a lot of these here, but I'm keeping this movement of mine. This hand doesn't really move from this motion like this. It's the paper that's kind of moving around, so I keep it in a nice ergonomic kind of format in which my inks are being applied, and you know, I'm not causing any kind of stress on my hand because, you know, this is the natural position and motion of this hand right here. Okay? Alright, let's go ahead and apply some of this to this road here. Alright, just for some tonal variation. Okay? Alright. Why don't we apply some of that to these houses as well? This row of houses, which I've used in a couple of videos recently, is by 100 Proof Press rubber stamps. You can take a look at their website. Okay, that was the tea dye. Why don't we try antique linen? It's going to be lighter, so we won't be able to see that at all. Let's try. Where did it go? There we go. Here's my Walnut Stain. Okay, let's stay with the distress inks for right now. It's a little bit darker. I knew that it was just a touch darker in value than that. Yeah. Which one did I just use? Did I just use the antique, the tea dye? Get all these names mixed up. Or I don't get them mixed up, I just kind of forget which one's which. The color naming convention, I guess it's more interesting than saying light, medium, dark, very dark brown or something like that, though. Alright, there's the walnut. See, it's darker right down here, and I varied it so that, you know, there's variation on this on this road. Okay, same thing down here. Hitting it under the trees in the grassy area, kind of mellow out that green hue, super bright green hue. Let's add some of it down on this road over here, and then maybe up here, just to vary it a little bit. Okay, there we have it. It's really starting to address the road, huh? Kind of moving up into these brown tones. The brown tones just kind of bring everything together in terms of these two color schemes. Or two color I don't know, swatches kind of merging together as one. It's the brown that I think kind of brings everything together. Yeah, in terms of, you know, this particular color scheme. Okay. Now I laid down some of that tea dye on top of this cabin, and on the sides, but maybe I'll just put it on the sides when it comes to this walnut stain so that it looks like the cabin now is a little bit more three-dimensional. Or is that too light on the roof? Let's put a little bit of tone. Like that. Okay, but we'll keep most of it on the vertical sides of the cabin, giving the cabin a little bit more of a three-dimensional look. Okay, all right. Well, this is a lot of scenes to be doing all at once. They're all kind of, yeah, I don't know, a couple of these are really similar, but as far as compositionally, they're, you know, they're a little bit different, I guess, as far as variation goes. To keep it kind of interesting in terms of a process. I'm not someone that really likes to say, like if we're having a swap and, you know, do 15 identical, you know, cards or something like that. Original cards. That's the way swaps used to be. Someone kind of reminded me of that recently. I was like, wow, you made, you know, you made whatever, X amount of those, you know, back in, you know, 1995 or 6 or something like that for a swap. An exchange. Okay, here we go. Okay, we got the cabin up there again. We'll do the same thing that we did on the previous card just now, and I will vary the use of tone depending on the plane of the cabin. So vertical planes will receive more ink, and that'll make the cabin look a little bit more dimensional, but not completely. Let's put a few little streaks. It's supposed to look like a kind of a rustic cabin maybe, so put a few streaks onto the roof. Okay. Right and left-hand corners for a little bit of a kind of a vignette effect. Okay. All right, that is that. That's the walnut stain right there. All right, let's move into one of my favorite colors, which is a Marvy Brown. Okay, that's all it's called. It's just called brown. All right, it's a little bit darker than the walnut stain that we just used, but this is the one that really, for me, I've used a lot in the past to really render my brown objects and grassy areas. It's a fairly bright brown, but it mellows out a lot of what's going on in the grasses after I've moved through, you know, all those variations of green. Okay. Okay, let's do the same thing that we did with that previous brown. Maybe I'll vary the side of it a little bit. Maybe I'll have a little bit of a darker brown, which isn't really dark because this is more of a medium brown, but darker than how it is now. Underneath that eave, there's a kind of a door right there. And we'll address that cabin accordingly. Okay. I don't think I'll put too much of this brown, if any, in the background. Usually things are a little more kind of bright and saturated the closer they are to you as you look off in the distance. Colors tend to get a little bit more muted because, you know, the light reflecting off of them, you know, comes back to our eye through everything in the atmosphere, you know, the dust and moisture and everything, and kind of breaks up the image a little bit. So I'll leave that as is. In other words, I'm not putting this brown on that mountain back there. Okay. Bottom right-hand corner at the base of the cabin, giving it a little bit of visual weight. Okay. Hitting the shadow areas where the darker greens are, kind of. This one has a lot of road, because I stamped the crooked path higher and created some additional road using the grass textures, the various grass textures, to continue the road down to the base of the composition. Shading down here. Okay. All right, let's move on into my darkest brown, which is just called dark brown. And I'll kind of hit those similar areas to that previous brown, but maybe a little bit less so. Darken some of my shadows and define them. When I put it over green, it looks more like a kind of dark olive green when we kind of overlap brown and green together. All right. That got pretty dark over there. Hitting some shadows underneath some of these trees. Kind of anchoring them down somewhat, right? Cabin right here could use a little bit of tone underneath it to kind of really fully situate it within that given space by creating that shadow at the base of it, and maybe put some tone over some of the cabin on the vertical sides, creating a little bit more variation between the three different planes of the top, left side and right side, seeing that light is hitting it in a little bit different areas depending on what side of the cabin it is, facing what side, you know, towards wherever the light is. Trees right here could use a little bit of a shadow at the base of them. Okay. This one looks like I already used that dark brown. Huh. Maybe not. Okay. Don't have to use too much of it, though. Okay. Go something like that. And final piece, as far as these very similar looking ones. I would never do all of these. If I was to address each one of these individually, I would never do them all like this, these same colors like this if I was to do one at a time. But I didn't want to be switching inks out constantly, you know, for a different, I don't know, completely different palette or something like that. Like, you know, if I wanted to do one of these looking like a sunset or something, like a sunrise or something like that, it would take too long to address 6 different compositions. Address 6 compositions in one video, that is. Okay, kind of anchoring that cabin down in shadow. Okay. So we have that. All right. Let's go for a little variation now. We have all these blues, greens, brown tones within the scene. Well, Should we do it now? Yeah, let's do it right now. Look at my fingers here. I saw that fingerprint up there. It's because I'm doing so much. My fingers are really inky. Oh well. Fingerprint of the creator, I always say, if someone gets a fingerprint on their card, you know. Those types of things never really bother me, though. Okay, this is a really bright pink. And what I'm going to do with this is I'm just going to put a little bit of a tinge of some of this color in the sky to create a little bit of variation. Where it overlaps blue, we'll get a little bit of violet, and where it goes into white, we'll see kind of the pure version of it in terms of that pink, okay? And it kind of creates kind of a nice soft kind of appearance and feel. Okay, see that right there? Just kind of lightly applying some of those little streaks in there. Maybe I'll put a little bit more violet over here. I'm going to cover up that kind of fingerprint of mine. So we'll create a little bit of variation in our skies. Let's see down here on the road. That pink is up there, so let me balance this off a little bit more. Let me add a little bit more to this sky since I have so much of it over here. Alright, maybe, I don't know, maybe this is kind of a, you know, dusk or dawn type of scene now. Let's see, I'm kind of bringing some of this down into my path. Creating a little bit of continuity between up here and up here. You can put some of it down in your cabin as well. Just on that rooftop, you know, reflecting some of that light. Okay, so there you have that. Let's do some of it down here on this road, okay? Maybe I won't bring too much of it into my sky here, but, you know, a little bit of a tint, maybe, on my mountain. I see that little tinge right there, and it's down here. Oh, let me see, let me bring a little bit of up here into my sky, so it's not completely unrelated. Alright, see there it is right up here. See that kind of glow being created by that extra little hue right there? I mean, it's subtle, but it's pretty effective. Maybe right here in this background. Little road. Okay, so we have something like that. Let's do it right here. I'll use some of it in my grass, believe it or not. Yeah, I'll put a little touch of, ooh, that's quite a bit of it up there on that cabin, that rooftop. Maybe it's a little bit too bright. That's where you'd go into it with like a gel pen. Alright, let's bring it into the sky. Okay. Bring a little bit down on this road. I guess it does kind of look like a little bit kind of dusk-ish, like these two characters are kind of walking home after you know, walk into town or something like that. Some kind of streakiness going on up there in the sky. This is kind of brightening and illuminating kind of my walkway down here a little bit. What is this again? Rosemary. This sky up here is really dry. Let me see if I can do, oh, let me see, let me take some of this. They have a little bit of ocean, or aqua still, so let me bring some of that back in here just to moisten this sky up a little bit. Okay. The Marvy inks, like I said, are kind of not very slippery. They're kind of thin inks, so they kind of penetrate the paper a little bit faster. Okay, so here we go with that. While doing this in kind of this mass production style certainly did create a lot of similarities between all of the different compositions doing it that way, but here we have it here. Okay. So what are we on? About 6 scenes, all pretty fully realized in terms of light and darks. Now I didn't have to go, you don't have to go all the way with any of these, you know. They don't have to go all the way to practically black in that dark brown. That dark brown is really dark, but you can see like that. You can kind of see the process in terms of kind of defining things, but you can really see where we've rendered these paths and roads. They remain kind of the lightest, well, I don't know, there's some areas in the sky that are lighter than it, but within that given space, these paths and roads are the lightest things in those areas, which allows the viewer's eye to enter from. Okay, those are where the visual lead-ins come into play. All right, now let me see this one right here. I didn't really finish this one. Let's see, what do I have on there? I have, this is a dark brown on here. Oh, I'm just going to, well, these tips really become like a sponge on a stick, you know, which is what they are. They're sponges, and you know, you soak them up with ink. Let me get some of that brown out of there, because there was so much brown in there. All right, let's go with this Danube blue here, and let's make this one a little bit more finished. Okay, this is a nighttime scene, so I think it could stand, you know, go quite a bit darker. This is the Memento again. I want to finish this one off a little bit because there's so much monotony going on with the color schemes of the other ones. Let's have one that's, you know, different. Okay. was the Danube. Let's try let's try this Prussian Blue. Prussian Blue is pretty dark. It's dark, deep, and rich. Okay, let's hit it down in the shadows down here. Don't color in everything when you get to your darker tones. Kind of, they're a little bit more perimeter oriented unless you have a big area to fill in with it, okay? But when it comes to like areas of land, you know, have your variation in there. Retain that variation just for a little bit of a variety, visual variety, okay? The darker you take your areas in your scene, the lighter your light areas or objects will appear by contrast. Okay. A lot of times what I like to do is the colors that I stamp my scene out in, my objects in, I like to finish off with that same color, so this one happens to be black. So let's hit this in the, well, kind of in the four corners. Deepen the shadows a little bit. Alright, so there we have it on that. It's a pretty fully realized moonlight scene. Okay. And you can stand to get, you know, kind of darker in a scene like this, of course. You can really push the kind of the value range, you know, if a scene's supposed to be dark anyway. Have, you know, certain areas light, you know, though. You know, have them illuminated by whatever light source you decide on. It doesn't have to be anything as official as a object like a moon or something like that. It could just be a general area. Or maybe the moon's out of the picture, but you wanted some areas illuminated down below, like a stage or something like that, where it just kind of would be something akin to a spotlight that you directed to, you know, a certain area within the scene, okay? There you have that. Alright, now let's take a look at some of this black here, you know. You can use some of this down in a scene like this too. These objects were stamped out in just black ink. It's not that you necessarily want to make them darker, but maybe you want some other objects within the scene to stand out as being a little bit lighter. So we have this in here, creating a little bit more contrast. Okay. Bottom corner, maybe not that corner over there because it's much lighter. Put a little bit of shadows underneath these oak trees. Put a little shadow being cast by that horse. And maybe I will put a little bit of this over here, just to create a little bit more tonal range within my road. Okay. So it kind of lightens up this area just by contrast. Let's see. There we go. right, left corner. Okay. Right, left side. Yeah, a little bit on the cabin. So, let's go ahead and vary that road just a touch. I'm using a very light tapping right here of my black. It's more of a gray now, okay? It's a very pale gray because it's very dry on this. So I'm kind of dry brushing this in, okay? A lot of times people don't see anything happening and they press harder and boom, then they get, you know, a shape like that, okay, which you don't want. So it's almost invisible, okay, with each touch that you add. Let's add a little bit of a shadow at the base of that, the rider. Okay, this one, the sky got a little bit darker. In the top left and right. You can put a little bit of tone down there like so. Alright, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4. My desk is getting cluttered again. After just a few days of stamping. I have to tilt this up because I have the glare coming off the lights here. Okay, so here we go. Let's take a look at these visual lead-ins, and after coloring them, what they can do for your compositions. Alright, so see, after you do your visual lead-ins like that, if you kind of tone things to the left and right of them a little bit, now, these would be really fast if I just did them monochromatically, but you can move through these different things and not too slow of a method, even if you are using... I used a lot of colors on each area. I probably used, what, maybe 3, 4 different shades of kind of that brownish tone in terms of the distress inks, the various medium and darker browns. There was Walnut Stain that's in the cabins, some of the mountains, and the roads and the pass. I used some pink down there so that added another color. Variations of green in here, which also included, I think, just about all of the browns are in the grassy areas right here. But just see, from the very fact that I ran that green in here, you know, these grassy areas don't look brown. They look, you know, greenish, you know, kind of an earthy green or whatnot. But you can get this nice variation in here. But the fact, you know, the main point as far as a visual lead-in is that you leave these lead-ins lighter, okay, and that allows the viewer to enter the scene as such, okay. It kind of creates this emotional kind of pull that will, you know, take your viewer into the scene. It could be to a destination, or it could just be to a general area. I guess, you know, your viewer is eye is gonna go straight up to that mountain and probably come back down to the rider. This one just goes off into the distance or whatnot. Who knows what's behind that slope on the other side of the, you know, the hill or whatever, that slope right here. This one just keeps going on. It probably goes through that meadow in the background and continues on or whatnot. I don't know. But you can also still put something on that area in the background. You can do all kinds of things. I don't have anything kind of going on in, you know, any of these skies right here. I did pull some different birds out. You know, they're kind of fun to add into a scene. Like like something like that. It kind of creates kind of something for the eye to travel back to, you know. This one's the flock right here. Maybe I'll blot it off a little bit to give it, you know, a little bit of a lighter impression. Maybe making it look like it's kind of farther back in the distance or something like that. But anyways, boy, did I think next time I won't do 6 of the same color scheme in one video. I sure like the way they turned out, though. It's just a little bit too much of the same thing. I get a little bit bored with I don't know, a couple of these are really similar in compositional kind of a theme, but I do like the way these turned out, and it is kind of interesting looking at all of these together, because it really does reinforce the idea of the visual lead-in and you know, kind of what these different roads and paths, you know, can kind of look like within a given scene. So, or as a whole, you know, in terms of a, you know, a visual kind of a tool for you to enter a scene. Anyways, I'm kind of blabbing on right here. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions about any types of colors or anything like that, click on the Show More button underneath the video, and I'll try to give a listing of some of the inks that I've used, and if you want to know what stamps were used in these compositions right here, they were in the video prior to this one. Okay, thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning into the channel.